All right, welcome to lesson 19.2, Patterns and Processes of Evolution. The goal is to explain how the scientific theory of evolution is supported by the fossil record, comparative anatomy, and comparative embryology, biogeography, molecular biology, and observe evolutionary change. All that stuff leads up to evolution. Yes. Kind of a funny far side. God makes a snake. Boy, these things are a cinch. All right, so moving on here. We will go over these questions in class. If you want to pause, take a look at them. We'll be looking at those in class a little closer. So our objectives are to identify the processes that influence the survival or extinction of a species or a clade, contrast gradualism and punctuated equilibrium, name two important patterns in macroevolution, and explain the evolutionary characteristics of co-evolving organisms. All right, so the fossil record shows a parade of organisms that evolved, survived for a time, and then disappeared. More than 99% of all species that have lived on Earth are extinct. How have so many different groups evolved, and why are so many now extinct? So our first objective is identify the processes that influence survival or extinctions of a species or a clade. Grand transformations in anatomy, phylogeny, ecology, and behavior, which usually takes place in the clades larger than a single species, are known as macroevolutionary patterns. The ways new species emerge through speciation and the ways species disappear through extinction are both examples of macroevolutionary patterns. The emergence, growth, and extinction of larger clades, such as mammals or dinosaurs, are also macroevolutionary patterns. Paleontologists study fossils to learn about patterns of macroevolution in the history of life. Fossils are classified using the same cladistic techniques based on Scher's-derived characters that are used to classify living species. In some cases, fossils are placed in clades that contain only extinct organisms. In other cases, fossils are classified into clades that include living organisms. Throughout the history of life, organisms have faced changing environments. Some species can adapt to new conditions and thrive. Other species fail to adapt and become extinct. The rates at which species appear, adapt, and become extinct vary among clades and from one geologic time to another. It's late. The emergence of new species with different characteristics can serve as the raw material for macroevolutionary change within a clade. If the birth rate of a new species in a clade is equal to the death rate or extinction, the clade will survive. If the death rate of the species exceeds the birth rate, then obviously the clade will die out. In some cases, the more varied the species in a particular clade are, the more likely the clade is to survive environmental change. For example, the clade Reptilia is one example of a highly successful clade. It includes living organisms like crocodiles, but also dinosaurs and the surviving members of the dinosaur clade, like birds. Species are always evolving and competing, and some species become extinct because of the slow but steady process of natural selection, referred to as background extinction, as you can see here. In contrast, mass extinctions affects many species over a relatively short period of time. This graph shows how the rate of extinction has changed over time. In mass extinctions, entire ecosystems vanish and whole food webs collapse. Species become extinct because the environment breaks down, and the evolutionary process of natural selection can't compensate quickly enough. Until recently, researchers looked for a single cause for each mass extinction. For example, geologic evidence shows that at the end of the Cretaceous period, a huge asteroid crashed into Earth and caused global climate change. At about the same time, dinosaurs and many other species became extinct. It is therefore reasonable to infer that the asteroid played a significant role in the mass extinction. Mass extinctions, however, are probably caused by several factors working in combination, like volcanic eruptions, moving continents, and changing sea levels. After a mass extinction, biodiversity is dramatically reduced. Extinction, however, offers new opportunities to the survivors. More resources, right? As speciation and adaptation produce new species to fill the empty niches, biodiversity recovers. This recovery does take a long time, typically between 5 and 10 million years. Some groups of organisms survive a mass extinction, while other groups don't. So the first objective is to identify the processes that influence survival or extinction of a species or clade. So if the rate of speciation in a clade is equal to or greater to the number of extinction, to the rate of extinction, the clade will continue to exist. If the rate of extinction in a clade is greater than the rate of speciation, then the clade will eventually die out. Contrast gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. Gradualism involves a slow, steady change in a particular line of descent. Slow, steady change. The fossil record shows that many organisms have indeed changed gradually over time. For example, the pattern of slow, horseshoe crabs, for example, have changed little in structure from the time they first appeared in the fossil record. This species is said to be in a state of equilibrium, which means that the crab structure has not changed much over a very long stretch of time. So this pattern of slow, steady change does not always hold true. Also, punctuated equilibrium is a term used to describe equilibrium as interrupted by brief periods of more rapid change. The fossil record reveals periods of relatively rapid change in many groups of organisms. Some biologists suggest that most new species are produced during periods of rapid change. Rapid evolution may occur after a small population becomes isolated from the main population. This small population can evolve faster than the larger one because genetic changes spread more quickly among fewer individuals. Rapid evolution may also occur when a small group of organisms migrates to a new environment. That's what happened with the Galapagos finches, for example. Mass extinction opens many ecological niches, creating new opportunities for the organisms that survived. Groups of organisms that survive mass extinctions evolve rapidly in several million years after the extinction. So contrast gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. So evidence shows that evolution has proceeded at different rates for different organisms at different times over the long history of life. So name two important patterns in macroevolution. Studies often show that a single species or a small group of species have diversified over time into a clade containing many species. These species display variations on the group's ancestral body plan, and they often occupy different ecological niches too. These differences are the product of adaptive radiation, an evolutionary process by which a single species or a small group of species evolves over a relatively short time into several different forms that live in different ways. This diagram shows part of the adaptive radiation of mammals. An adaptive radiation may occur when species migrate to a new environment or when extinction clears an environment of a large number of inhabitants. A species may also involve a new feature that enables it to take advantage of a previously unused environment. For example, dinosaurs flourished for about 150 million years to the Mesozoic era. The fossil record documents that during this time, mammals diversified but remained small. However, most dinosaurs became extinct. An adaptive radiation began and produced a great diversity of mammals in the Cenozoic era, shown here. Both Galapagos finches and the Hawaiian honey creeper, shown here, evolved from a single bird species. Both finches and honey creepers evolved different beaks and different behaviors that enable each of them to eat different kinds of foods. Sometimes groups of organisms evolve in different places or different times, but in similar environments. These organisms start out with different structures, but they face similar selection pressures. In these situations, natural selection may mold different body structures in ways that perform similar functions. Because they perform similar functions, these body structures may look similar. Evolution produces similar structures and characteristics in different distantly related organisms through the process of convergent evolution. Convergent evolution has occurred often in both plants and animals. For example, mammals that feed on ants and termites evolved five times in 5 different regions, as shown in this figure right here. They all developed the powerful front claws, long hairless snout, and tongue covered with sticky saliva that are necessary adaptations for hunting and eating insects. You have another example over here of different types of animals, placenta mammalia and Australian marsupials. Different locations, but similar body plans. So objective 2, name 2 important patterns in macroevolution. 2 important patterns in macroevolution are adaptive radiation and convergent evolution. Finally, objective 4, explain the evolutionary characteristics of co-evolving organisms. So sometimes the life histories of 2 or more species are so closely connected that they evolve together. The process by which 2 species evolve in response to changes in each other over time is called coevolution. Coevolution of flowers and pollinators is common and can lead to unusual results. For example, Darwin discovered an orchid whose flowers had a 40-centimeter long structure called a spur with a supply of nectar at the bottom. Ta-da! Darwin predicted that some pollinating insect must have some kind of feeding structure that would allow it to reach the nectar. Darwin unfortunately never saw that insect. About 40 years later, researchers discovered a moth with a 40-centimeter long feeding tube that matched Darwin's prediction. Ta-da! Over time, many plants have evolved bad-tasting and poisonous compounds that discourage insects from eating them. Once plants began to produce poisons, natural selection on herbivorous insects favor any variants that could alter, inactivate, or eliminate those poisons. Milkweed plants, for example, produce toxic chemicals, but monarch caterpillars not only can tolerate these toxins, they can also store in the body tissues to use as defenses against their predators. Pretty handy, don't you think? So objective 4 is to explain the evolutionary characteristics of the co-evolving organisms. The relationship between 2 co-evolving organisms often becomes so specific that neither organism can survive without the other. Thus, an evolutionary change in one organism is usually followed by a change in the other organism. So objectives are to identify the process that influenced survival or extinction of a species or clade, contrast gradualism and punctuated equilibrium, name 2 important patterns in macroevolution, and finally explain the evolutionary characteristics of co-evolving organisms. All of them help to support our goal of explaining how the scientific theory of evolution is supported by the fossil record, comparative anatomy, comparative embryology, biogeography, molecular biology, and observe evolutionary change. Thank you for watching lesson 9.2. And there's your picture. That's a monarch caterpillar.